Eliza Rowan had been invisible for so long she'd stopped trying to be seen. In Bennett's Creek, a nowhere town squatting at the base of the Rockies, she occupied the same space as dust, present, ignored, easily swept away. She worked in the back room of Miller's General Store, hemming trousers and patching work shirts for miners and ranch hands who never looked her in the eye. They'd drop their clothes on the counter, grunt a price, and leave. Sometimes they didn't even pay. Just assumed she'd wait. She always did. Because what choice did she have? 26 years old, no family, no prospects, a face too plain to draw attention, and a body too thin from skipped meals to suggest anything other than poverty. The other seamstresses in town, the ones who worked the front rooms with big windows and hand-painted signs, they wouldn't hire her, said she didn't fit the aesthetic, which was a polite way of saying she looked like exactly what she was, poor, tired, and forgettable. Even the church ladies, who prided themselves on Christian charity, had a way of glancing past her during Sunday services. She'd sit in the back pew, hands folded, waiting for someone to say hello. No one ever did. Not that Eliza blamed them. She barely existed, even to herself. Most nights, she'd return to the boarding house where she rented a corner room, barely bigger than a closet, and sit by the window with a chipped cup of tea. The window overlooked the mountains. Massive, indifferent, beautiful in a way that made her chest hurt. She used to wonder what it would be like to disappear into them. Just walk until the town was gone. Until she was gone. But she never did. Because disappearing required courage, and Eliza had learned a long time ago that she didn't have much of that, until the letter came. It arrived on a Tuesday. No postage, no return address, just her name, Eliza Rowan, written in sharp, angular handwriting on the front of a plain envelope. She found it slipped under her door when she got home from work, her fingers still pricked and aching from 14 hours of stitching. For a long moment, she just stared at it. No one sent her letters. No one knew her well enough to bother. She opened it slowly, half expecting it to be a mistake. A bill meant for someone else. A prank. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You are invited. Coordinates: 39.478 2 degrees north, 106.0391 degrees west. Come alone. Bring what you can carry. This is not a request. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Eliza turned the paper over. Nothing. She read it again. And again. Her heart started to pound. She didn't recognize the coordinates, but she knew enough to understand they pointed somewhere deep in the mountains, far beyond Bennett's Creek, far beyond anywhere civilized. A smart person would have thrown it away. A cautious person would have told someone. But Eliza wasn't smart or cautious. She was desperate. And desperation makes people do reckless things. She left 3 days later. Packed everything she owned into a single canvas rucksack. 2 dresses, a coat that had seen better decades, a needle kit, and $37 she'd been saving for something she couldn't quite name. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving. There was no one to tell. The journey took 2 days on foot, hitching rides when she could, walking when she couldn't. The terrain grew harsher with every mile. Paved roads gave way to dirt paths. Dirt paths gave way to trails that barely qualified as such. By the second day, the air had thinned enough that every breath felt like work. Her feet blistered inside boots that had never been meant for this kind of distance. But she kept going. Because going back meant returning to a life where she didn't exist. And at least out here, in the cold and the quiet, she could pretend she was moving towards something, even if she had no idea what. She reached the coordinates just before sunset. The settlement appeared like something out of a fever dream. It wasn't a town, not in any traditional sense. It was a fortress carved into the mountainside, part mining camp, part ranch, part something else entirely. Rough-hewn cabins clung to the cliffs like barnacles. Smoke rose from stone chimneys. Horses stood in corrals, their breath misting in the cold air. And everywhere there were men, big men, hard men. Men who looked like they'd been forged in the same unforgiving landscape that surrounded them. Eliza stood at the edge of the settlement, suddenly aware of how out of place she was. Her thin coat, her blistered hands, her entire existence. A mistake. This had to be a mistake. She turned to leave. You lost? The voice came from behind her, low, rough and unamused. Eliza spun around. A man stood there, tall, maybe 6'2", broad-shouldered in a way that suggested labor, not vanity. He wore a heavy canvas coat, worn jeans, and boots caked in mud. His hat cast a shadow over his face, but she could see enough. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He looked at her the way you'd look at a stray dog, suspicious, inconvenienced, and already calculating whether to chase it off or ignore it. Eliza's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. I got a letter. A letter. An invitation, coordinates. I thought, you thought wrong. He started to walk past her. Wait. He stopped. Didn't turn around, just stood there, shoulders tense, like her very presence was an irritation he didn't have time for. Please, Eliza said. I came all this way. I need to know why. Why I was invited. Who sent it? A pause. Then, finally, he turned his head just enough to look at her. No one invited you. But the letter. Someone's playing a game. His tone was flat, final. And you walked right into it. Now turn around and go home before you freeze to death out here. He walked away. Left her standing there, alone, again. Caleb Ridge didn't have time for this. He had 40 head of cattle to move before the next storm hit. He had a fence line that needed mending. He had a council meeting in 2 hours where a bunch of old bastards were going to pressure him, again, into doing something he had no intention of doing. And now he had this. A woman, lost, probably conned. Standing at the edge of his settlement like a ghost who didn't know she was dead yet. He'd seen it before. People showed up in the mountains for all kinds of reasons. Most of them bad. Desperation, debt, delusion. They thought the wilderness would save them. It never did. The wilderness didn't save anyone. It just revealed who you really were. And most people didn't like what they found. Caleb walked back toward the main lodge, his boots crunching on frozen ground. He shouldn't have stopped. Shouldn't have said anything. But something about her... He shook his head. No, not his problem. But what? She's still out there? The voice belonged to Roy Tanner, one of the older hands. He stood on the porch of the lodge, arms crossed, chewing on a piece of jerky. Caleb didn't answer. Saw her walking up the ridge trail about an hour ago, Roy continued. Looked half dead already. Then she'll be all the way dead by morning. Roy raised an eyebrow. Cold. Realistic. You gonna let her freeze? Caleb shot him a look. I'm not her keeper. No, Roy said slowly. But you're the one who runs this place. And if some girl dies on our doorstep because we turned her away, she's not our responsibility. Maybe not, but the council's going to ask questions, especially if she's connected to anyone. You know how this works, Caleb. People die up here. It reflects on all of us. Caleb's jaw tightened. He hated when Roy was right. He found her an hour later, sitting on a fallen log near the edge of the tree line. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving, just sitting, staring at nothing, like she'd run out of options and was waiting for the mountain to decide what came next. Caleb stopped a few feet away. You're still here. She didn't look up. Didn't have anywhere else to go. Bennett's Creek's 30 miles that way. He jerked his head south. I know. Then start walking. I can't. Why not? She finally looked at him. Her eyes were gray, flat, empty in a way that made something twist uncomfortably in his chest. Because I burned it down. Caleb frowned. What? Not literally. She let out a hollow laugh. But I left. Packed everything. Didn't tell anyone. And if I go back now... She shook her head. There's nothing there for me. There never was. So you came here. I came here because someone told me to. And I know that sounds stupid. I know you think I'm an idiot, but I didn't have anything else, and I thought, her voice cracked. I thought maybe this was a sign, that maybe someone actually wanted me somewhere. Caleb said nothing, because what the hell was he supposed to say to that? I'll leave in the morning, she said quietly. I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. I can work, I can sew, I can... Stop! She stopped. Caleb exhaled slowly, steam rising in the cold air. This was a bad idea. He knew it was a bad idea. But Roy was right. If she died out here, it would come back on him, on the settlement. And he didn't need that kind of attention. One night, he said finally, you sleep in the guest cabin. Tomorrow, you figure out where you're actually going. Understood? She nodded. And don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. Just stay out of the way. I will. Good. He turned to leave. Thank you. He didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because this wasn't kindness. It was damage control. The cabin was small. One room, a cot, a wood stove that barely worked. But it was warm. And after 2 days of walking through freezing wind, warm was enough. Eliza sat on the edge of the cot, staring at her hands. They were raw, cracked, the kind of hands that told a story no one wanted to hear. She thought about the man who'd brought her here, Caleb. She'd heard someone call him that as he walked away. He hadn't been kind, but he hadn't turned her away either. And in Eliza's experience, that was more than most people offered. She lay down, pulled the thin blanket over herself, and closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she let herself believe she might actually survive the night. She woke to voices. Angry voices. Eliza sat up, disoriented. It was still dark outside. The fire in the stove had burned down to embers. The voices were coming from outside. She moved to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. A group of men stood near the main lodge, 5 of them, all older, all dressed like they owned the place. And in the center, Caleb. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. One of the older men, gray-haired, thick around the middle, was doing most of the talking. Don't care what you think is fair, Ridge. The deal's been on the table for 6 months. And I've said no for 6 months, Caleb replied evenly. You can't keep saying no. Watch me. Another man stepped forward, taller, meaner looking. You're being selfish. This isn't just about you. This is about the whole settlement. We need that alliance with the Markhams. Their ranch controls the southern supply routes. If we don't lock that down before winter, then we figure something else out. There is nothing else, the gray-haired man snapped. And you know it. All you have to do is marry the girl. That's it. 1 ceremony, 1 signature, and we're secured for the next 5 years. Eliza's breath caught. Marry? I'm not marrying Caroline Markham, Caleb said flatly. Why the hell not? She's beautiful, connected. Her family's got more land than we could use in 3 lifetimes. I don't care. Then what do you care about? Silence. Caleb's jaw worked. Finally, he said, I'm not doing it. The gray-haired man's face reddened. You stubborn son of a... We're done here. Caleb turned and walked away. The men stood there, furious, muttering among themselves. Eliza stepped back from the window, her heart pounding. She didn't fully understand what she'd just heard, but she understood enough. These people wanted something from Caleb, and he was refusing, which meant he had power here, real power. And suddenly, Eliza realized she'd walked into something far more complicated than a random invitation. Morning came gray and cold. Eliza didn't sleep again after the voices faded. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of where she was and what the hell she was supposed to do next. When the sun finally rose, weak and pale through the clouds, she got up, washed her face with water from a basin, and stepped outside. The settlement looked different in daylight, still harsh, still unwelcoming, but alive. Men moved between buildings, hauling supplies, tending animals. Smoke rose from chimneys. Somewhere, a hammer rang against metal. It was a working place, a surviving place. Eliza wrapped her coat tighter and started walking toward the main lodge. She didn't know where else to go. As she approached, a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was maybe 40. Blonde hair pulled back severely, a face that might have been pretty once, but had hardened into something sharper. She looked at Eliza like she was an insect. You're the girl from last night. Yes. You still here? Yes. The woman's eyes narrowed. Why? I don't know, Eliza admitted. I'm trying to figure that out. Well, figure it out somewhere else. We don't need strays. She turned to go back inside. Wait. The woman stopped, didn't turn around. I can work. Eliza said quickly. I can sew, mend clothes, cook, clean. I don't need much, just we're not a charity. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance. The woman glanced over her shoulder, studied her. Then, after a long moment, she said, the communal hall needs someone to handle laundry, 6 days a week. You get a meal and a place to sleep. That's it. Eliza's heart leapt. I'll take it. Good. Start now. The work was brutal. Washing clothes for 40 men in freezing water, scrubbing until her hands bled, hanging everything to dry in wind that cut like knives. But Eliza didn't complain. She kept her head down. Worked. And slowly, some of the hostility faded. Not much, but enough. By the end of the first week, a few of the men started nodding to her when she passed. One of them even said thank you when she returned his shirt. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. She saw Caleb occasionally, always at a distance. He never spoke to her, never acknowledged her. It was like she didn't exist, which was fine. Eliza was used to not existing, but sometimes, just sometimes, she'd catch him watching her, just for a second, and then he'd look away. 2 weeks after she arrived, everything changed. It was a Friday night. The settlement held a communal dinner every Friday. Everyone gathered in the main hall, shared food, talked, drank. Eliza usually stayed in the back, invisible as always, but tonight someone noticed her. One of the younger ranch hands, drunk, loud, stupid, pointed at her across the room. Hey, who's the new girl? Silence rippled outward. Eliza froze. She's nobody, someone else muttered. She looks like help. Is she help? I think so. The drunk kid laughed. Hey, help! Get me another drink! A few people chuckled. Eliza's face burned. She started to stand, started to leave, and then, she's not help. The voice cut through the room like a blade. Caleb. He stood near the far wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Everyone turned to look at him. She's not help, he repeated. The drunk kid frowned. Then what is she? Caleb's eyes locked on Eliza. And in that moment, she saw something flicker across his face. A decision. A reckless, dangerous decision. He walked across the room, stopped in front of her, and said very clearly, She's mine. The room went silent. Eliza's heart stopped. What? Someone whispered. Caleb didn't look away from her. Eliza Rowan. My wife. And just like that, everything changed. The room exploded. Voices overlapping. Questions shouting. Chairs scraping. Caleb ignored all of it. He held out his hand to Eliza. She stared at it. Her mind was screaming. What is he doing? Why is he doing this? This is insane. But his eyes... There was something in his eyes. Not warmth, not affection, but a silent plea. Trust me. Eliza took his hand. He pulled her to her feet and without another word led her out of the hall. Behind them, chaos erupted. He didn't stop until they were outside, far enough away that the noise faded into the background. Then he let go of her hand and turned to face her. I need you to listen very carefully. Eliza's heart was still racing. What the hell was that? A solution. To what? To both our problems. She stared at him. I don't understand. Caleb exhaled slowly. The council wants me married. They've been pushing me to marry into the Markham family for months. It's a political move, an alliance. I don't want it. So you... what? Lied? I improvised. By claiming I'm your wife? Yes. That's insane. Maybe. He looked at her. But it works. Works how? You need a place to stay. I need them off my back. We help each other. Eliza's head was spinning. This is... No, I can't. 1 year, Caleb said. You stay here. Play the part. In return, I give you shelter, food, and enough money at the end to start over anywhere you want. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. This is a business deal. Exactly. A fake marriage. Exactly. Eliza laughed. It came out harsh, bitter. You're out of your mind. Probably. He crossed his arms. But I'm also your best option. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to go to hell. But he was right. She had nothing, no money, no plan, no future. And he was offering her all three. 1 year, she said slowly. 1 year. And then I leave. And then you leave. And no one knows the truth. No one. Eliza looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd appeared out of nowhere, who'd saved her without wanting to, who was now offering her a lifeline wrapped in a lie. Why me? She asked quietly. Caleb hesitated. Then, because you're the one person no one would believe I'd choose. It should have hurt. It didn't, because it was the truth. And Eliza had always preferred the truth. Okay, she said. Okay? 1 year. Caleb nodded, and just like that, Eliza Rowan became someone she'd never been before. A woman someone wanted, even if it was a lie, even if it was temporary. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. And that was enough. The announcement hit the settlement like a rock slide. By morning, everyone knew. Caleb Ridge, the man who'd turned down Caroline Markham, who'd told the council to go to hell, who'd spent years building walls around himself, had a wife. And not just any wife. A nobody. A stranger. The girl who'd been doing their laundry for 2 weeks. The council called an emergency meeting before the sun was fully up. Eliza could hear them shouting from inside Caleb's cabin, where she'd spent the night on a cot he'd set up in the corner of the main room. He'd slept somewhere else. Hadn't said where. She sat by the window, listening to grown men lose their minds. This is unacceptable. You can't just spring this on us. Where the hell did she even come from? Caleb's voice came through, lower than the rest, but somehow cutting through the noise. It's done. Move on. Done? You married some drifter without telling anyone? I don't answer to you. The hell you don't. The settlement operates on agreements, on structure. You can't just... I can. And I did. A pause. Then a different voice. Older, tired. When? 2 months ago, Caleb said without hesitation. In Bennett's Creek. Small ceremony. Just us. The lie came out smooth, practiced, like he'd been preparing for this. Why keep it secret? Someone demanded. Because it wasn't anyone's business. Everything you do is our business. You're the damn foreman. Then fire me. Silence. No one was going to fire him. They all knew it. Caleb ran half the operations in the settlement, the livestock, the supply routes. The men respected him more than they respected the council. He had leverage, and he was using it. Finally, the gray-haired man from the night before, Eliza had learned his name was Warren, spoke up. We want to meet her. No. That wasn't a request, Ridge. And my answer wasn't negotiable. You bring some woman up here, claim she's your wife, and expect us to just take your word for it? Yes. Warren's voice went cold. Tonight. Communal dinner. She sits with you. We see her. We talk to her. And if she can't answer basic questions about her own damn husband, this whole thing falls apart. Caleb didn't respond right away, then. Fine. Eliza's stomach dropped. She wasn't ready for this. She didn't know anything about him. Didn't know his favorite food or his birthday or how he took his coffee. Didn't know the first thing about being a wife, fake or otherwise. The meeting broke up. Boots stomped away. Doors slammed. And then the cabin door opened. Caleb stepped inside. He looked at her. You heard. Every word. Then you know what we're dealing with. Eliza stood, her hands clenched at her sides. I can't do this. You already agreed. I agreed to stay here, not to perform in front of a firing squad. It's one dinner, where they're going to interrogate me, so don't crack. His tone was flat, unbothered. Eliza stared at him. You're serious? You think I joke about this? I think you're insane. You've said that already. Because it's still true. She turned away, her hands shaking. I don't know anything about you. I don't know your family, your history, your favorite damn color. How am I supposed to convince anyone we're married? Caleb crossed the room, pulled out a chair at the small table, sat down. Then we fix that. What? Sit. She hesitated. Sit, Eliza. She sat. He leaned back, arms crossed. You want to know about me? Ask. Just like that? We've got 12 hours. Better start now. Eliza exhaled slowly. Okay, fine. Where were you born? Right here, this settlement. Parents? Dead, both of them. My father built half these cabins before a logging accident took him out. My mother lasted another 3 years before pneumonia got her. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting facts from a ledger. I'm sorry, Eliza said quietly. Don't be. It was a long time ago. How old were you? 16 when she died. And you've been here ever since? Where else would I go? Eliza didn't have an answer for that. My turn, Caleb said. She blinked. What? You ask me questions, I ask you. That's how this works. I thought this was about you. It's about both of us. If they ask me about you and I don't know the answer, the whole thing collapses. He leaned forward. So, where were you born? St. Louis. Why'd you leave? Eliza's throat tightened. My parents died when I was 12, fever. I went to live with an aunt who didn't want me. She put me to work in her boarding house until I was old enough to leave. So I did. And ended up in Bennett's Creek. Caleb studied her. No siblings? No. Friends? No. Anyone who'd come looking for you if you disappeared? The question hit harder than it should have. No, she said quietly. Something shifted in his expression, just for a second. Then it was gone. Good, he said. Makes this easier. It shouldn't have stung, but it did. Because he was right. No one would come looking for her. No one ever had. They spent the rest of the day like that, trading facts, building a framework, a marriage made of lies stitched together with just enough truth to hold. Eliza learned that Caleb hated coffee but drank it anyway because it was practical, that he'd learned to ride before he could read, that he'd once broken his arm falling off a horse and reset it himself because the nearest doctor was 2 days away. He learned that Eliza was left-handed, that she could sew anything but hated cooking, that she'd never learned to ride a horse because she'd never had reason to. By the time the sun started to set, they had a story. Not a good one, not a believable one, but a story. One more thing, Caleb said as Eliza stood to leave. She turned. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple. Silver. Worn. He held it out. Eliza stared at it. Where did you... It was my mother's. Her breath caught. I can't. It's not real, he said. None of this is. But if you don't wear a ring, they'll notice. She took it slowly, slipped it onto her finger. It fit. Thank you, she said. He didn't respond, just nodded once and walked out, leaving her standing there, staring at a dead woman's ring on her hand, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The communal hall was packed. Every man, woman, and child in the settlement had shown up, not because they were required to, but because they wanted to see, wanted to watch the new wife stumble, wanted to watch Caleb's lie fall apart. Eliza could feel their eyes on her the moment she stepped through the door. She wore the only decent dress she owned, dark blue, plain, patched in 3 places. Her hair was pulled back. The ring felt heavy on her finger. Caleb was already there, standing near the head table. He looked at her, nodded once. She walked over. He pulled out a chair for her. She sat. The room went quiet. Warren stood at the far end of the table, arms crossed. Well, here she is. Eliza forced herself to meet his eyes. Here I am. Eliza Rowan. Eliza Ridge now, Caleb said evenly. Warren's jaw tightened. Right, of course, he looked at Eliza. So, tell us about yourself. There's not much to tell. Humor us, she swallowed. I grew up in St. Louis. My parents died when I was young. I moved around after that. Ended up in Bennett's Creek. Did seamstress work. That's where I met Caleb. Bennett's Creek, Warren repeated. That's a long way from here. It is. What brought Caleb down there? Eliza's mind went blank. They hadn't covered this. She glanced at Caleb. He didn't react. Supply run, she said quickly. He was picking up equipment. I was working at the general store. Warren raised an eyebrow. And you just fell in love? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Caleb's hand moved under the table, found hers, squeezed once, a warning or reassurance. She wasn't sure which. I didn't believe in love, Eliza said quietly. Not the way people talk about it. But Caleb didn't talk. He just showed up every time he came through town. And one day he asked me to come with him, so I did. It wasn't entirely a lie. He had shown up. He had asked her to come with him. The context was just different. Warren didn't look convinced. And you got married? Yes. When? 2 months ago. Where? A church in Bennett's Creek. Name? Eliza's heart pounded. St. Michael's. She had no idea if there was a St. Michael's in Bennett's Creek, but Warren didn't challenge it. He just stared at her. Then finally, he turned to Caleb. You didn't think to tell anyone? No? Why not? Because it wasn't your business. Everything you do is my choice, Caleb finished. I don't owe you explanations. Warren's face reddened. You owe this settlement. I owe this settlement my work, and I give it every day. What I do outside of that is mine. The tension in the room was suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. Then a woman's voice cut through the silence. I have a question. Eliza turned. The blonde woman from before, the one who'd given her the laundry job, stood near the back. Her expression was cold. Go ahead, Margaret, Warren said. Margaret stepped forward, looked directly at Eliza. If you're really his wife, then you know him, right? Yes. Then tell me, what's his favorite meal? Eliza's mind raced. They hadn't covered this. She glanced at Caleb. His face was unreadable. He doesn't have one, she said slowly. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Everyone has a favorite meal. Not him. He eats whatever's available. He doesn't care about food. A pause. Then Caleb spoke. She's right. Margaret looked at him. That's convenient. It's the truth. Fine. What about her? Margaret turned back to Eliza. What does she do when she's upset? Eliza froze. Caleb didn't. She gets quiet, he said. Doesn't yell, doesn't cry, just shuts down, pulls into herself. Eliza stared at him. He'd described her perfectly. But how? They'd only known each other 2 weeks. Margaret's expression flickered. And you? What about me? What do you do when you're upset? Caleb's jaw tightened. I leave. That's it? That's it? Margaret stared at him, then at Eliza. Finally, she shook her head. I don't believe this. You don't have to, Caleb said. This is ridiculous. Enough. Warren held up a hand. We're not here to interrogate them to death. The fact is, they're married. Legal or not, it's done. And unless someone has proof otherwise, we move forward. No one spoke. Warren looked at Caleb. But this doesn't change anything. You still have responsibilities. This settlement still needs... I know what it needs. Then act like it. Caleb stood, held out his hand to Eliza. We're done here. She took it. They walked out together. Behind them, the hall erupted in whispers. Outside, the cold air hit like a slap. Eliza pulled her hand free, her chest tight. I almost blew it. But you didn't. I didn't know what your favorite meal was. Because I don't have one. You guessed right. I didn't guess. I panicked. Caleb stopped walking, turned to face her. You did fine. Fine isn't good enough. If Margaret hadn't backed off, she did. Because you held your ground. He studied her. You're tougher than you think. Eliza laughed bitterly. I'm not tough. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. That's a terrible philosophy. It's kept me alive. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who dragged her into a lie, who defended her in front of a room full of hostility, who knew things about her he shouldn't know. How did you know? She asked quietly. Know what? That I shut down when I'm upset. Caleb hesitated. Then, I've been watching you. Why? Because you're my responsibility now, and I don't take risks with things I'm responsible for. It should have sounded cold, clinical, but there was something underneath it, something he wasn't saying. Before she could push, he turned away. Come on, we've got work to do. What work? Making this look real. Over the next 2 weeks, Eliza learned what it meant to be Caleb Ridge's wife. It meant moving into his cabin, sleeping in the same space, even if they stayed on opposite sides of the room. It meant eating breakfast together, walking to the main lodge together, sitting beside each other during communal meals. It meant letting him put his hand on the small of her back when they passed through doorways. It meant pretending, all the time. And the strangest part? It started to feel less like pretending. Caleb taught her things without meaning to. How to read the weather by the color of the sky. How to tell if a horse was favoring a leg. How to split firewood so it didn't kick back and hit you in the face. He didn't do it kindly. He did it efficiently. But somewhere in the efficiency, Eliza found herself learning. And somewhere in the learning, she found herself staying, not because of the deal, but because, for the first time in her life, she had a place. Even if that place was built on a lie. One night, 3 weeks in, they sat by the fire in the cabin. Caleb was sharpening a knife. Eliza was mending a tear in one of his shirts. The silence between them had stopped being uncomfortable. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He didn't look up. "Go ahead." "Why didn't you marry Caroline Markham?" His hand stilled. "You don't have to answer," she added quickly. "No, it's fine." He set the knife down, stared at the fire. "She's not a bad person, smart, capable, exactly what the council wanted." "Then why?" "Because marrying her would have made me something I'm not." He looked at her. "I've spent my whole life keeping this place running, keeping people alive, and they respect that. But the second I marry into the Markham family, I stop being the guy who keeps things running. I become the guy who sold out for land and supplies. But you need those things." "Not badly enough to lose myself." Eliza set the shirt down. "So you chose me instead." "I chose a different option. A worse option." Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Debatable." She looked at him. "Do you regret it?" He considered the question. Then, "No." "Why not?" "Because you're still here, and you haven't run yet." "You think I will?" "Eventually." He picked up the knife again. "Everyone does." Eliza's chest tightened. "I'm not everyone," she said quietly. Caleb glanced at her, and for the first time since they'd met, he didn't look away. "No," he said, "you're not." Something shifted in that moment, something neither of them acknowledged, but it was there. A crack in the wall, small, but growing. The settlement began to change, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. Eliza noticed it in small ways. The women stopped glaring at her during communal meals. A few of them even nodded when she passed. One, a younger woman named Sarah, asked her for help mending a blanket. Eliza said yes. And suddenly, she wasn't just Caleb's wife. She was part of the rhythm, part of the system. The men respected her because Caleb did. And Caleb, he was different too. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, stayed at the dinner table longer instead of disappearing the second the meal ended. People noticed. "Never seen him like this," Roy said one afternoon, watching Caleb help Eliza carry supplies from the storage shed. "Like what?" Eliza asked. Roy grinned. "Human." She didn't know how to respond to that, but later when she mentioned it to Caleb, he just shrugged. People see what they want to see. And what do they see? A man who got married. And what's the truth? He looked at her. "I don't know yet." That should have scared her. It didn't, because she didn't know either. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. The first real test came 5 weeks in. A supply caravan arrived from the valley. Markham territory. And with it, Caroline Markham herself. Eliza saw her before Caleb did. She was tall, beautiful in a sharp, calculated way. Blonde hair pulled back in a perfect braid, expensive coat, polished boots. Everything Eliza wasn't. Caroline dismounted her horse and scanned the settlement. Her eyes landed on Caleb, and she smiled. Not warm, predatory. Eliza's stomach twisted. She watched as Caroline walked over, watched as Caleb's expression went carefully blank. "Caleb? Caroline? It's been a while." "Has it?" Her smile sharpened. "I heard a rumor. Thought I'd come to see for myself." "And?" Caroline's gaze shifted, landed on Eliza. "Is this her?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "Yes." Caroline studied her, slow, deliberate, like she was appraising livestock. Interesting. Eliza forced herself to hold eye contact. Can I help you? I don't know. Can you? Caroline, Caleb said quietly. A warning. Caroline's smile didn't waver. Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble. Just curious. She turned back to him. You chose her over me. I didn't choose anyone over anyone. I made a choice. A strange one. Maybe. Caroline stepped closer, lowered her voice. You know this doesn't change anything, right? The settlement still needs what my family offers. And sooner or later, you're going to have to come back to the table. We'll manage. Will you? Yes. Caroline glanced at Eliza again. She better be worth it. Then she walked away. Eliza's hands were shaking. Caleb saw. Ignore her. She hates me. She hates that I said no. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like it. Caleb turned to face her fully. Listen to me. Caroline Markham is used to getting what she wants, and when she doesn't, she makes it everyone else's problem. Don't let her get in your head. Easy for you to say. No, it's not. His voice was firm. But you're here. She's not. And that matters. Eliza wanted to believe him, but as she watched Caroline disappear into the main lodge, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying the encounter over and over. Caroline's smile, her confidence, the way she'd looked at Eliza like she was nothing. You awake? Caleb's voice came from across the room. Yeah. A pause. Then, she got to you. No. Liar. Eliza exhaled. Fine. Yes, she got to me. Why? Because she's everything I'm not, and everyone knows it. Silence. Then Caleb's footsteps. He crossed the room, sat on the edge of her cot. Look at me. She did. You think I wanted someone like her? I think you wanted someone capable. You are capable. I can sew and do laundry. She runs a ranch. And you survived 2 weeks in this settlement without knowing a single person. You stood in front of the council and didn't break. You took a deal most people would have run from. He leaned closer. That's not nothing. Eliza's throat tightened. Why are you saying this? Because it's true. Or because you need me to believe it. Caleb's jaw worked. Then, quietly, maybe both. He stood, walked back to his side of the room, but before he lay down, he said one more thing. For what it's worth, I don't regret choosing you. Eliza closed her eyes, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she believed him. The realization should have scared her. Instead, it settled into her chest like something inevitable, like she'd been walking toward it since the moment Caleb had said, she's mine, in front of everyone. But knowing something and admitting it were different things. So Eliza kept her mouth shut, kept working, kept pretending, even as the pretending started to hurt. 2 days after the storm cleared, Caroline Markham returned. This time, she didn't come alone. Eliza saw the caravan approach from the cabin window. 4 wagons, a dozen riders, and at the front Caroline herself, sitting tall in her saddle like she owned the entire mountain range. They're back, Eliza said. Caleb was at the table reviewing supply logs. He didn't look up. I know. What do they want? Same thing they always want, which is control. He set down his pen and stood. Stay inside. Like hell, Caleb shot her a look. Eliza, if this is about us, I'm not hiding. This isn't about us. This is about territory and supply lines and politics you don't understand. Then explain it to me. I don't have time. Make time. They stared at each other. Finally, Caleb exhaled. Fine. Caroline's family controls 3 of the 4 major routes into this settlement. If they cut us off, we don't eat, we don't get medicine, we don't survive the winter. They know that, and they've been using it as leverage to get what they want. Which is you married to Caroline. Which was me married to Caroline. Now they're just trying to prove a point. What point? That I made the wrong choice. Eliza's stomach twisted. And did you? Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he grabbed his coat. Come on. Where? With me. If you're not going to stay inside, you might as well see how this works. They walked to the main lodge together, Caleb's hand resting on the small of her back in that familiar way that didn't feel like pretending anymore. The council was already assembled when they arrived. Warren stood at the head of the table, his expression grim. The other members sat in their usual places, arms crossed, faces hard. And at the far end of the room, leaning against the wall like she had all the time in the world, was Caroline. She smiled when she saw Eliza, not friendly, amused. "Mrs. Ridge, how lovely to see you again." Eliza forced herself to meet her eyes. "Miss Markham, please, call me Caroline. We're practically family after all." Her gaze slid to Caleb. "Aren't we?" "State your business, Caroline," Warren said flatly. Caroline pushed off the wall, walking slowly around the table. Her boots clicked against the wooden floor. Every step deliberate, calculated. "My father sent me to discuss the supply agreement. As you know, winter's coming, and you're going to need food, medicine, ammunition, all the things we provide." "For a price," Roy muttered. "Everything has a price." Caroline stopped in front of Caleb, close enough that Eliza could see her perfume was expensive, her coat tailored, everything about her screamed money and power. "The question is whether you're willing to pay it." "We've paid," Caleb said, "every month, on time." "You have. But circumstances have changed." She glanced at Eliza, her eyes traveling from her worn boots to her simple dress to her hands, still rough from work. The assessment was quick, dismissive. "You're a married man now. That comes with responsibilities. And my father feels that our previous arrangement no longer reflects the current situation." Warren leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the rates are going up, effective immediately." The room erupted. "You can't do that. That's extortion. We had a contract." Caroline's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "The contract was contingent on goodwill between our families. Goodwill that has been severely damaged by recent decisions." Her eyes never left Caleb. "You chose to marry outside the valley. That's your right. But it has consequences." Caleb's jaw tightened. "How much?" "Double." The word landed like a stone. Silence. Complete silence. Warren stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's insane. We can't afford that." "Then I suggest you find another supplier." "There is no other supplier." "Exactly." Caroline smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So I suppose you'll have to decide, pay the new rates, or starve." Eliza's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She'd spent her whole life being overlooked, being dismissed, being told, in 1,000 small ways, that she didn't matter. But this was different. This was someone using her existence as a weapon against people who'd finally started to accept her. "What if we don't pay?" Eliza said. Everyone turned to look at her. Caroline's smile widened. "I'm sorry?" "I said, what if we don't pay? What if we find a way to survive without you?" "Eliza," Caleb said quietly. A warning. She ignored him. "You said everything has a price, but you're betting we can't afford to call your bluff. What if you're wrong?" Caroline stepped closer. So close, Eliza could see the flecks of green in her blue eyes, could smell her perfume, could feel the weight of her presence. "I'm not wrong." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen the numbers. I know exactly how much food you have stored, how much medicine, how many weeks you can last before people start dying." She tilted her head. "Can you say the same?" Eliza's heart pounded. Her palms were sweating, but she held her ground. "We'll figure it out." Caroline laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. "You're brave, I'll give you that. Stupid, but brave." She turned to Caleb. "Is this really what you want? A wife who doesn't know when to stay quiet?" "She's right here," Caleb said, his voice dangerously calm. "If you have something to say to her, say it." "Fine." Caroline looked at Eliza, really looked at her, not dismissive this time, measuring. "You don't belong here. You know it. I know it. And sooner or later, he's going to figure it out too. So enjoy this while it lasts. Because the second winter gets bad enough, the second people start going hungry, they're going to blame you. And when that happens," she smiled, "you'll leave, just like every other person who thought they could survive this place." The words hit harder than Eliza expected, because part of her, a small, quiet part she tried to ignore, wondered if Caroline was right. Before Eliza could respond, Caleb stepped between them, his back to Caroline, his eyes on Eliza. And in that moment, she saw something that steadied her. Trust. Complete trust. He turned to face Caroline. "We're done here." "We're done when I say we're done," Caroline shot back. "No. We're done now." Caleb's voice was steel. "You delivered your message. Rates are doubled. We'll discuss it and get back to you. You have 3 days. We'll take a week." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "You're in no position to negotiate." "And yet here I am, negotiating." He moved toward the door, his hand finding Eliza's. "Come on." They walked out together. Behind them, the council exploded into arguments. Voices rising, accusations flying, but Caleb didn't stop, didn't look back, just kept walking until they were outside, far enough away that the noise faded into the wind. Then he let go of her hand and turned to face her. "What the hell was that?" Eliza blinked. "What?" "Challenging her like that? Do you have any idea what you just did? I stood up for us. You made it personal." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. His voice was tight, controlled, but underneath, she could hear the fear. "This was already bad, Eliza. Now it's worse." "How is it worse? She was going to screw us over either way. But now she has a target." He pointed at her. "You. She's going to come after you specifically, and she won't stop until she breaks you. Let her try." "This isn't a game." "I know it's not a game." Eliza's voice cracked. The words came pouring out before she could stop them. "I know exactly what this is. It's the same thing that's followed me my entire life. People deciding I don't matter, that I'm not worth the space I take up, that I should just disappear and make things easier for everyone else, and I'm done with it." Caleb stared at her. "I'm done being invisible," she continued. Her hands were shaking. "I'm done apologizing for existing, and I'm especially done letting people like Caroline Markham treat me like I'm disposable, like I'm some temporary inconvenience that'll go away if they just wait long enough." She took a breath. "So if that makes things harder for you, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to hide anymore." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. The wind picked up, cold, sharp. Then quietly, "I never asked you to hide. You asked me to stay inside because I didn't want you in the middle of this. Not because I was ashamed of you." He stepped closer. "You think I regret choosing you over Caroline? I think you regret that it's making everything harder. Everything was already hard. That's just life here." He looked at her, really looked at her. "But you've made it less hard. And I don't know how to explain that without sounding like an idiot, but it's true." Eliza's throat tightened. The anger started to drain away, leaving something else in its place. Something raw. "I don't want you to leave," Caleb said. The words came out rough, like they'd been stuck inside him for weeks. "When the year's up, when the deal's over, I don't want you to go." The world narrowed to just the two of them, standing in the cold, everything else fading away. "Caleb, I know what we said. I know this was supposed to be temporary, but it stopped being temporary a long time ago, at least for me." He exhaled slowly. "So if you want to leave at the end of this, I'll hold up my end. I'll give you the money. I won't stop you. But I need you to know, I don't want you to." Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was stare at him and wonder how the hell they'd gotten here. "Say something," Caleb said. "I don't know what to say." "The truth would be good." Eliza laughed. It came out shaky, broken. "The truth? The truth is I stopped pretending weeks ago. The truth is I wake up every morning and forget this isn't real. The truth is—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "The truth is I don't want to leave either." Caleb's expression shifted, and before Eliza could process what was happening, he closed the distance between them, kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful. It was desperate and messy and real. His hands cupped her face, her fingers twisted in his coat, and when he pulled back, his forehead resting against hers, he said, "Then don't." Eliza's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay?" "Okay." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, and this time she kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb said, "We should probably go back inside." "Probably." Neither of them moved. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the sun started to sink behind the mountains. And for the first time since Eliza had arrived at the settlement, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The next 3 days were chaos. The council met constantly, arguing over Caroline's demands. Some wanted to pay, some wanted to fight, some wanted to find a third option that didn't exist. Caleb spent most of his time in those meetings, coming back to the cabin late at night, exhausted and frustrated. His shoulders tight, his jaw clenched. Eliza tried to help where she could. She talked to the women, asked questions, learned about storage and rationing and what it would actually take to survive a winter without outside supplies. The answer wasn't encouraging. "We'd last maybe 6 weeks," Sarah said one afternoon as they sorted through grain stores. Her hands moved efficiently, separating the good from the questionable. "After that, we'd be eating leather and hope. There has to be another way." "If there is, no one's thought of it yet." Sarah paused, holding up a handful of grain. "This batch has weevils. We'll have to throw it out." Eliza stared at the half-empty storage shed, at the bags of grain, the jars of preserves, the dried meat hanging from hooks. It looked like a lot, but spread across 40 people for an entire winter? What if we rationed harder, cut back now so we have more later? People are already hungry. You cut back more, and they'll riot. Then we need more food. From where? Everything's frozen. Hunting's impossible in deep winter, and the valley controls every other supply route. Sarah dumped the contaminated grain into a waste bucket. "We're stuck. And Caroline knows it." Eliza's mind raced. There had to be something, some option they weren't seeing, some way out of this trap. That night she brought it up to Caleb. He was sitting by the fire, staring at nothing. A cup of coffee had gone cold in his hands. "What about the northern route?" she asked. He looked up slowly. "What northern route?" "The one nobody uses." "Nobody uses it because it's suicide. The terrain's too rough, too dangerous. Even in good weather, it's barely passable." "But it exists." "Technically." "Then why not try?" Caleb shook his head, set down the cup. "Because the last group that tried to use it lost 3 men and half their supplies. That was 20 years ago. No one's been dumb enough to try since." "What if we're careful?" "Eliza, it's not happening." "Why not?" "Because I'm not risking lives on a maybe." "But you'll risk them on slow starvation?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair." She moved closer, sat down beside him. "I know I don't understand everything about this place. I know I'm still figuring things out. But I also know that doing nothing isn't an option. And if there's even a chance the northern route works, there isn't." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen what that route does to people." The way he said it made Eliza stop. There was something underneath the words. Something old. Caleb stood, his back to her, walked to the window, stared out at the darkness. "My father tried it when I was 10. We were having a bad winter and the valley was gouging us even then. So he took 4 men and went north to find another way." Eliza waited. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "They made it through. Barely. Came back with enough supplies to last us 3 months. But one of the men lost his hand to frostbite. Another never walked right again. Had to use a cane for the rest of his life." Caleb's voice cracked. "And my father, he was different after that. Haunted. He'd wake up screaming about the cold, about the things he'd seen, about the choices he'd had to make." "What choices?" Caleb was silent for a long time. Then, "They got caught in a storm. One of the men fell, broke his leg, couldn't walk, and my father had a decision to make. Stay with him and risk everyone dying, or leave him behind and save the rest." Eliza's breath caught. "He left him," Caleb said. "Left him in the snow with a pistol and enough supplies for 1 night. Told himself the man would catch up when the storm cleared, but they both knew the truth." "I'm sorry. My father never forgave himself. Drank himself to death 5 years later. And you want me to send men up that route again?" He turned to face her. "I can't, Eliza. I can't ask someone to make that choice." Eliza stood, crossed the room, put her hand on his arm. "Then don't. We'll find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. We just haven't found it yet." Caleb looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "How do you do that?" he asked. "Do what?" Stay hopeful when everything's falling apart. Eliza thought about it. Because the alternative is giving up. And I've given up before. I know what that looks like. I know where it leads. She held his gaze. This is better. Caleb pulled her close, held her, and they stood there in the darkness, holding each other as the wind howled outside. The deadline came faster than anyone wanted. 3 days turned into 2, 2 turned into 1, and suddenly it was time to give Caroline an answer. The council met one final time. Warren looked older than Eliza had ever seen him. His face was gray, his eyes tired. We don't have a choice. There's always a choice, Roy said. Not this time. We pay or we die. Those are the options. Warren's voice was flat, defeated. We've gone over the numbers a dozen times, tried every angle. There's no way around it. So we let them bleed us dry. We survive. That's all that matters. Is it? One of the younger council members spoke up, a man named Thomas. Is surviving enough if we have to sell our souls to do it? Don't be dramatic. I'm not. I'm asking a real question. What's the point of surviving if we lose everything that makes this place worth fighting for? Warren slammed his hand on the table. You want to tell that to the families who'll starve if we don't take this deal? You want to look them in the eye and explain why your pride is more important than their lives? Silence. Caleb sat at the far end of the table, silent. He'd been quiet the entire meeting, listening, watching. Eliza stood near the door, watching him. Finally, Warren turned to him. You've been quiet. Because there's nothing to say. You're the one who got us into this mess. I could at least what? Caleb's voice was dangerously calm. Apologize? Admit I was wrong? Offer to fix it by marrying Caroline anyway? Would that be so terrible? The room went still. Caleb stood slowly. Yes, it would. Why? Because of her? Warren jerked his head toward Eliza. Because of me. Caleb's hands were clenched. Because I'd rather die than spend the rest of my life pretending to be something I'm not. Because I've watched this settlement bow to the valley for 20 years, and I'm done with it. That's selfish. Maybe, but it's honest. Warren's face reddened. This settlement doesn't run on honesty, it runs on survival. And right now your honesty is going to get people killed. Then maybe we need to find a better way to survive. There is no better way. Then we make one. How? Caleb didn't answer, because he didn't have one. None of them did. Thomas spoke up again. What if we didn't rely on the valley at all? Warren turned to him. What are you talking about? I'm talking about cutting ties completely, building relationships with other settlements, finding new routes, new suppliers. It'll be harder. It'll take longer. But at least we'd be free. We'd be dead before spring. Maybe, maybe not. Warren shook his head. This is insane. You're all insane. But Eliza saw something flicker across the other council members' faces. Not agreement, but consideration. The seed of an idea. Roy leaned forward. How many other settlements are within range? 4, Thomas said. Maybe 5 if we stretch it. And would they trade with us? Some might, if we have something they want. Like what? Labor, skills. We've got craftsmen, hunters, people who know how to survive up here. That's worth something. Warren laughed bitterly. You're proposing we rebuild our entire supply network in the middle of winter. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself fine. Question is, do you? The meeting dissolved into arguments after that, but the idea had been planted. And as Eliza watched the council debate, she realized something. They were done bowing, even if they didn't know it yet. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to Caleb breathe on the other side of the room. They'd crossed a line, both of them. But crossing it didn't solve anything. It just made everything more complicated, more real, more terrifying. You awake? Caleb's voice came through the darkness. Yeah. Me too. Silence. Then Eliza said, What are we going to do? I don't know. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She heard him shift. Sit up. You asked me earlier if I regretted choosing you over Caroline. Yeah. I don't. But I do regret that it's hurting people. that it's making things harder for everyone. It's not your fault, isn't it? I knew this would cause problems. I knew the valley would push back, and I did it anyway. Eliza sat up too. Because it was the right thing to do. Was it? Because right now it feels pretty damn wrong. Caleb, I've spent my whole life trying to protect this place, to keep people safe, and now, because of me, they're going to go hungry. Maybe worse. His voice was rough. So yeah, maybe I should have just married Caroline. Maybe that would have been the smarter choice. Eliza's chest tightened. She stood, crossed the room in the darkness, sat on the edge of his cot. Look at me. He did. She could barely see his face in the dim firelight, but she could see his eyes. You didn't make the wrong choice, she said firmly. And I'm not saying that because I'm selfish. I'm saying it because marrying someone you don't love to save people who would have demanded the same thing 10 years from now isn't protecting them. It's just delaying the problem. Maybe, but at least they'd eat. For now. And then what? The valley keeps squeezing, keeps demanding, and eventually you run out of things to give. She took his hand. This was always going to happen, Caleb, with or without me. The only difference is now you're finally fighting back. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm scared. It was the first time she'd heard him admit it. Me too, Eliza said. What if I can't fix this? Then we fix it together. What if we can't? Then we try anyway. He looked at her, and in that moment something passed between them. An understanding, a promise. They were in this together, whatever came next. Caleb pulled her down beside him, held her, and they stayed like that for the rest of the night, not sleeping, just holding on. The answer came from an unexpected place. 2 days after the deadline passed, 2 days of tense silence from the valley, a rider arrived at the settlement. Not from the valley, from the east. A young man, maybe 20, half frozen and barely conscious. Roy and 2 others carried him into the main lodge, laid him by the fire. Eliza helped strip off his wet clothes, wrap him in blankets. His skin was blue, his lips cracked. Where'd he come from? She asked. Don't know, Roy said. Found him collapsed about a mile out. Horse was dead. Looked like he'd been riding for days. The young man's eyes fluttered open. Water, he croaked. Eliza brought him a cup. He drank greedily, coughed, drank more. Then, I have a message. From who? Roy asked. Thompson Settlement, 20 miles east. He coughed again. They heard about your situation, heard you were having trouble with the valley. Warren, who'd just arrived, leaned forward. How'd they hear that? Word travels, especially when it's about the Markhams. The young man tried to sit up, failed. They want to help. Why would they help us? Because they hate the valley as much as you do. And because they need help too. He coughed again, harder this time. They want to trade. Trade what? Grain, medicine, whatever you need. The young man's eyes focused. In exchange for labor. They're rebuilding after a fire. Lost half their cabins. Need hands. Warren and Roy exchanged looks. How much labor? 2 months, 10 men? That's a lot. So is starving. Warren turned to Caleb. What do you think? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Eliza watched him process it, weigh the options. Finally, he said, I think we don't have another option. Warren nodded slowly. Agreed. And just like that, they had a way out. Not an easy one, not a perfect one, but a way. The next week moved like a landslide. Fast, chaotic, unstoppable. 10 men had to be chosen. The strongest, the most capable. Men who could handle 2 months of hard labor in unfamiliar territory. Caleb's name was the first on the list. No one argued. He was the foreman, the decision maker. And more than that, this was his idea to pursue, even if it had come from outside. The other 9 were selected through a combination of volunteering and necessity. Roy was too old, Warren too essential to daily operations. So it fell to the younger men, the ones with strong backs and fewer dependents. Eliza watched the preparations with a knot in her stomach that wouldn't loosen. 2 months, 60 days. It might as well have been a year. She helped pack supplies without being asked, mended clothes, organized food rations, kept her hands busy so her mind wouldn't spiral. But at night, Alone with Caleb in the cabin, the reality of it hit her. "You're really going," she said on the third night. Not a question, a statement. Caleb was checking his pack, making sure he had everything. "Yeah. For 2 months. Yeah. And I'll be here." He stopped, looked at her. "You'll be fine." "I know I will." "Then what's wrong?" Eliza sat on the edge of the cot. "Nothing's wrong. She paused. "I just got used to having you around. And now you're leaving." Caleb set down the pack, crossed the room, sat beside her. "I don't want to go." "I know. But I have to." "I know that too." He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. "Roy will look after things. And Margaret, she's harsh, but she's fair. If you need anything, I'll be fine, Caleb." "I know you will." He squeezed her hand. "But I need to say it anyway." They sat in silence for a while. Then Eliza said, "What if something happens while you're gone?" "Like what?" "Like Caroline comes back, or the council decides to make a deal without you, or—" She stopped. "Or what if people blame me for you leaving?" "They won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're not the reason I'm leaving. The valley is." He turned to face her fully. "Listen to me. Whatever happens while I'm gone, it's not your fault. You didn't create this situation. You're just the excuse they're using to justify it." "That doesn't make me feel better." "It should, because it means you have nothing to prove." He touched her face. "You belong here now, not because of me, because you've earned it." Eliza wanted to believe him. But belief was hard when doubt had been her companion for so long. "When you get back," she started. "When I get back, we'll figure it out," he said. "All of it. The settlement, the valley, us. Us." "Yeah." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." He kissed her then, slow and deep, like he was memorizing the feel of it. And when he pulled back, he said, "I love you." Eliza's breath caught. He'd said it before, but hearing it now, on the edge of separation, made it feel different, more real, more terrifying. "I love you too," she whispered. He pulled her close, held her tight, and they stayed like that until the fire burned down to embers. The morning Caleb left felt like the end of something. The sun rose cold and pale, the air sharp enough to hurt. The 10 men gathered near the main lodge, packs loaded, horses saddled. The entire settlement turned out to see them off, not because it was required, but because this mattered. These men were leaving to save them all. Warren gave a speech, something about duty and sacrifice and the strength of the community. Eliza didn't hear most of it. She was too focused on Caleb, on the way he stood, the set of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. He was scared. He'd never admit it, but she could see it. When Warren finished, the men started mounting their horses. Caleb walked over to Eliza. They stood facing each other. Everything they needed to say had already been said, but that didn't stop the words from trying to force their way out anyway. "Be careful," Eliza said. "Always am." "I mean it." "I know." He touched her face. "You be careful too." "Nothing's going to happen here." "You don't know that." "Then I'll handle it." Caleb smiled, small, sad. "Yeah, you will." He kissed her, not long, not dramatic, just enough to remind them both what they were coming back to. Then he pulled away, mounted his horse, looked down at her one last time. 2 months, he said. 2 months, she repeated. And then he rode away. Eliza stood at the edge of the settlement, watching him disappear into the distance, watching until the riders were just dark spots against the gray landscape, watching until even those disappeared. Sarah appeared beside her. "He'll be okay." "You don't know that." "No, but I know him, and he's too stubborn to let anything happen." Eliza laughed despite herself. "That's what I keep telling myself." "Then keep telling yourself." Sarah put a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, standing here won't bring him back faster." She was right. So Eliza turned away from the horizon, turned back toward the settlement, and got to work. Because that's what you did when someone you loved left. You kept going. The first week without Caleb, Eliza threw herself into work. She helped with laundry, mended clothes, organized storage. Sat through council meetings where Warren droned on about rationing schedules and winter preparations. She kept herself so busy she barely had time to think. But at night, alone in the cabin, the silence was deafening. She'd gotten used to the sound of him, the way he moved, the quiet rhythm of his breathing. Now there was nothing, just emptiness. She tried not to think about what could go wrong, tried not to imagine accidents, injuries, storms. But the thoughts came anyway, especially in the dark. The second week was harder. The work started to feel repetitive. The days blurred together, and the knot in her stomach that had loosened slightly began to tighten again. She missed him, not in some vague, abstract way. She missed specific things, the way he checked the fire every night before bed, the way he drank his coffee, black, bitter, grimacing with every sip, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Sarah tried to keep her distracted, invited her to help with various projects, introduced her to more of the women, and slowly, very slowly, Eliza started to feel less like an outsider. Margaret even spoke to her civilly one afternoon. "You're handling this better than I expected," Margaret said. They were sorting through preserved vegetables, checking for spoilage. Handling what? Him being gone. Most women would be falling apart. Eliza set down a jar. "I did my falling apart years ago, learned it doesn't help." Margaret studied her. "You're tougher than you look." "Everyone keeps saying that." "Because it's true." Margaret paused. "I was wrong about you." Eliza looked at her. "What?" "When you first showed up, I thought you were weak, thought you'd run, and the second things got hard." She went back to sorting. "But you didn't." "I didn't have anywhere to run to. Most people would have found somewhere." Margaret glanced at her. "You stayed. That takes guts." It wasn't much, but coming from Margaret, it felt like everything. "Thank you," Eliza said quietly. Margaret just nodded, and they went back to work. By the third week, Eliza had settled into a routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was stable, and stability was something. Then Caroline returned. Eliza was hauling water from the well when she saw the riders approach. Fewer this time, just Caroline and two men. Her stomach dropped. She set down the buckets and waited. Caroline dismounted slowly, deliberately, her eyes scanning the settlement like she was taking inventory. "Where's your husband?" she asked without preamble. "Working." "Where?" "East, Thompson's settlement." Caroline's expression shifted, something that might have been surprise or calculation. "Interesting, and here I thought he'd be too proud to beg for help from neighbors." "He's not begging, he's trading labor for supplies." "How noble." Caroline stepped closer, too close. "And how convenient that he left you here." "Alone." Eliza's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "To make you an offer." "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard it yet." "I don't need to." Caroline smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "You're scared. I can see it. You're terrified that while he's gone, this place is going to fall apart. That people are going to realize you're not strong enough to hold it together. That maybe, just maybe, I was right about you all along." Eliza's hands clenched. "I'm not trying to hold anything together. That's not my job. Isn't it? You're his wife. That makes you responsible." Caroline circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "But we both know the truth. You're not really his wife. You're a temporary solution to a permanent problem. And the second he gets back, the second this little arrangement of yours runs its course, you'll be gone. Just another woman who couldn't hack it in the mountains. You don't know anything about us. I know men like Caleb. I grew up around them. They don't change. They don't soften. And they sure as hell don't fall in love with women like you. Women like me. Women who bring nothing to the table." Caroline's voice was cold, clinical. "No land, no connections, no value beyond whatever lie you're helping him maintain. And when the lie stops being useful..." She shrugged. "Well, you know how these things end." Eliza wanted to hit her, wanted to scream, wanted to prove her wrong with something more than words. But instead she said very calmly, "Get off this property." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Get off this property, now." "You don't have the authority." "I'm Caleb Ridge's wife. That gives me exactly the authority I need. Eliza stepped forward, close enough that Caroline had to look her in the eye. You came here to intimidate me, to make me doubt myself, to plant seeds of fear and watch them grow. And maybe a few months ago, that would have worked. Maybe I would have believed every word you just said. And now? Now I know better. Eliza's voice was steady, firm. Because I've survived things you can't imagine. I've been poor, hungry, invisible. I've had people tell me I'm worthless my entire life, and you know what? I'm still here. So whatever game you're playing, whatever psychological warfare you think you're good at, I'm not interested. For the first time since Eliza had met her, Caroline looked genuinely surprised. Her smile faltered, just for a second, then her expression hardened. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but not today. Caroline stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned, mounted her horse. But before she rode away, she said one more thing. When this all falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. Then she was gone. Eliza stood there, her heart pounding, her hands shaking, but she didn't move, didn't falter. Just watched Caroline disappear into the distance. Sarah appeared from behind one of the cabins, eyes wide. Did you just… Yeah. You know she's going to come after you for that. I know. Sarah grinned. Good. About time someone told her off. Eliza laughed. It came out shaky. I think I'm going to throw up. That's just adrenaline. You'll be fine. Sarah linked her arm through Eliza's. Come on. Let's get you some water. They walked back toward the main lodge together. And despite the fear still coursing through her veins, Eliza felt something else. Pride. She'd stood her ground, and she hadn't apologized for it. That night, Eliza lay in bed and replayed the encounter over and over. She'd confronted Caroline Markham. She'd drawn a line, and for the first time in her life, she hadn't backed down. It should have felt good. It did feel good, but it also felt terrifying, because now Caroline knew she couldn't be pushed around, and people like Caroline didn't take that well. Eliza stared at the ceiling, at the shadows dancing across the wood, and wondered what the hell she'd just started. The fourth week brought disaster. One of the supply sheds caught fire. Eliza woke to shouting, the smell of smoke, the sound of people running. She threw on clothes and stumbled outside. Half the settlement was already there, forming bucket lines, shouting instructions, fighting the flames with everything they had. The fire was massive, orange and red and angry against the night sky. Eliza grabbed a bucket and ran. The heat hit her like a wall. Her eyes watered, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. She hauled water from the well, threw it on the flames, hauled more. Her arms screamed in protest, her back ached, but everyone else was doing the same thing, so she kept going. Minutes turned into an hour turned into 2. And finally, the fire started to die. They beat it back, smothered it, killed it. And when it was over, they stood in the wreckage, covered in soot and ash, staring at what was left. Not much. Maybe a quarter of the supplies had survived. The rest, grain, preserved food, medicine, gone. Warren's face was gray, his voice hollow. This is bad. How bad? Roy asked. We just lost 3 weeks' worth of grain. Maybe more. Warren ran a hand over his face. We were already cutting it close. Now we're screwed, someone muttered. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Eliza looked around at the faces, exhausted, defeated, scared. And something inside her snapped. No, we're not. Everyone turned to look at her. We're not screwed, she repeated. Her voice was louder than she intended, but she didn't care. We're set back. That's different. Easy for you to say, someone called out, an older man she didn't know well. You're not the one who's been here 20 years. You don't know what winter really means. You're right. I haven't been here 20 years. But I've been hungry. I've been desperate. I've survived on nothing because I didn't have a choice. She stepped forward. We still have some grain. We still have people. And we still have time before winter really hits, so we ration harder. We hunt more. We figure it out. And if we can't, then we ask for help. Warren shook his head. From who? The valley? They'll bleed us dry. Not the valley. Other settlements. The Thompson people already helped us once. Maybe there are others who will too. And what do we trade? We just lost half our supplies. We have nothing left to offer. We have labor. We have skills. We have people who know how to survive in conditions most settlements can't handle. Eliza looked at Warren. We survive. That's what we do. That's what this place has always done. And we don't stop just because things get hard. Silence. Long. Tense. Then Roy spoke up. She's right. Warren turned to him. What? She's right. We've been through worse than this. Hell, I remember the winter of 2009. Lost half the herd to disease, thought we were done. But we made it through. He looked around. We'll get through this too. One by one, others nodded, muttered agreement. Not everyone, but enough. Warren exhaled slowly, heavily. Fine, we ration, we hunt, and we see what other options we have. He turned to Eliza, his expression unreadable. You're in charge of coordinating with other settlements. Eliza blinked. What? You wanted to help, now's your chance. Write letters, send writers, find out who's willing to trade and what they want in return. I'm not qualified. You're the only one who stood up just now. That makes you qualified. He walked away before she could argue. Sarah appeared at her side, grinning despite the soot covering her face. Congratulations. You just got promoted. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither does anyone else. But you're the only one who had the guts to say we weren't screwed. So I guess that makes you the person for the job. Eliza didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She settled for getting back to work. The next 2 weeks were the hardest Eliza had ever experienced. She wrote letters to every settlement within 100 miles, detailed what they needed, what they could offer in return. Most were sent with riders who left at dawn and returned exhausted days later. Some responses never came. Others came back with flat refusals. 2 settlements told them to handle their own problems. One suggested they reconsider their relationship with the valley, but three said yes. Small amounts. Nothing like what they'd lost. A few bags of grain here, some dried meat there, medicine from a settlement that had surplus. But it was something. Eliza coordinated everything, worked out schedules, negotiated terms that wouldn't bankrupt them. She spent her days buried in numbers and logistics, her nights going over plans until her eyes blurred. Sarah helped when she could, brought her food she forgot to eat, made her sleep when she pushed too hard. You're going to work yourself to death, Sarah said one night. Better than sitting around doing nothing. There's a middle ground, you know. Not right now there isn't, Sarah sighed. Caleb's going to come back and find you half dead from exhaustion. Then I'll rest when he gets back. Stubborn? You're one to talk, Sarah smiled. Fair point. By the end of the 5th week, things started to stabilize. The new supply agreements were in place. Rations had been adjusted. Hunting parties brought back enough game to supplement their dwindling stores. It wasn't comfortable, but it was sustainable. And that was all they needed. Margaret found her one evening, sitting outside the main lodge, staring at a ledger that finally balanced. You look like hell, Margaret said. Thanks. Margaret sat down beside her. You did good. Eliza looked at her. I did what I had to. Same thing. Margaret was quiet for a moment. I didn't think you'd last a month here. I know. I was wrong, Eliza smiled. You admitting that? Don't get used to it. Margaret stood. But for what it's worth, you belong here, whether you believe it or not. She walked away before Eliza could respond. Leaving Eliza sitting there, staring at her hands, wondering when exactly she'd stopped being an outsider, when exactly this place had become home. The 6th week, word came from Thompson. A rider arrived at dawn, exhausted, half frozen, but with a message. Caleb was coming back, early. Eliza's heart leapt into her throat. When? She asked. Tomorrow, maybe the day after. Weather's been rough, so it's hard to say for sure. Tomorrow. After 6 weeks of silence, of worry, of missing him so much it physically hurt. He was coming home. Eliza spent the rest of the day trying not to think about it, trying not to count the hours, trying not to hope too hard. But when he finally rode into the settlement 2 days later, covered in dust and exhaustion and relief, all of that fell away. He dismounted, looked around, his eyes searching. And when he saw her, everything else disappeared. He crossed the distance between them in 6 strides, pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could barely breathe, and she didn't care. She wrapped her arms around him and held on just as tight. "You're okay," she said into his chest. "You're okay." "I'm okay." His voice was rough, raw. "Are you?" "I am now." He pulled back just enough to look at her, really look at her. And what she saw in his eyes made her chest ache. Relief, love, something that looked like awe. "I heard about the fire," he said. "We handled it." "I heard you handled it," Eliza shrugged. "Someone had to." Caleb's hands cupped her face. "I missed you. I missed you too." He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of everything they hadn't been able to say for 6 weeks. And when he pulled back, his forehead resting against hers, he said, "I'm not leaving again. Don't make promises you can't keep. I mean it. Whatever happens next, we face it together." Eliza's eyes stung. "Together," she repeated. "Yeah." And in that moment, standing in the middle of the settlement with half the population watching, Eliza didn't care about appearances, didn't care about propriety. She just kissed him again and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it through this. That night, they sat by the fire in the cabin, catching up. Caleb told her about Thompson, the work, the people, the unexpected friendships formed over shared labor. Eliza told him everything, the fire, the negotiations, Caroline's visit. His jaw tightened at that. "She came here? Tried to scare me off. Did it work? What do you think?" Caleb smiled. Actually smiled. The first real smile she'd seen in weeks. "I think I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air. Eliza froze. He'd said it before, but this time felt different, more deliberate, more certain. "Sorry," Caleb said quickly. "I shouldn't have—" "Say it again." He blinked. "What?" "Say it again." Caleb swallowed, set down his cup. "I'm in love with you." Eliza's throat tightened. "I'm in love with you too." His breath hitched. Then he was kissing her again, pulling her close, and Eliza realized something. This wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't a deal. This was real, and she wasn't letting it go. But reality had other plans. 3 days after Caleb returned, Warren called an emergency meeting. The council only. But word spread fast. Caroline had made good on her threat. The valley had cut off all remaining supply routes. Completely. No grain, no medicine, no ammunition, no trade of any kind. Nothing. "We've got maybe 4 weeks, Warren said, his voice flat. After that, we're in serious trouble," Roy finished. Caleb sat at the table, his expression dark. "She's trying to starve us out. She's succeeding, not if we don't let her." "And how do we stop her? We've already tried everything." "Not everything." Caleb looked up, met Warren's eyes. "The northern route." The room went silent, dead silent. Eliza's stomach dropped. "Caleb, you said—" she started. "I know what I said, but we don't have a choice anymore. That route killed people, and staying here will kill more." He stood. "I'll take a small group. We'll move fast, light, get in and out before the worst of winter hits." "That's suicide," Warren said. "Maybe, but it's a chance, which is more than we have sitting here." "You really willing to risk that?" Caleb looked at Eliza, held her gaze. "For this?" "Yeah, I am." And Eliza saw it in his eyes. He'd already made up his mind. Nothing she said would change it. The preparations took 3 days. 3 days that felt like 3 minutes. Caleb chose 4 men. The strongest. The most experienced. Men who'd proven themselves in harsh conditions. Roy wanted to go. Caleb refused. "Someone needs to run things here," Caleb said. "That's you. And if you don't come back, then you keep running things." It wasn't an answer, but it was all Roy was going to get. Eliza helped pack supplies, her hands moving mechanically while her mind screamed. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be another way. But she'd seen the numbers, the dwindling stores, the faces of people trying not to show their fear. There wasn't another way, and they both knew it. The night before Caleb left, Eliza couldn't sit still. She paced the cabin, checked and rechecked his pack, reorganized things that didn't need reorganizing. Eliza. She didn't stop. Eliza. What? She turned to face him. Caleb was sitting by the fire watching her. Come here. I'm busy. You're panicking. I'm not. She stopped, exhaled. Fine. I'm panicking. I know. Then why did you ask me to come here? Because I want to hold you, and you're making that difficult. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. She crossed the room, sat beside him. He pulled her close. They sat in silence for a long time, just breathing together. Finally, Eliza said, You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. There might be another way. There isn't. We both know it. He tightened his arms around her. And if I don't go, someone else will. And I'm not asking someone to take a risk I wouldn't take myself. That's very noble. I hate it. Caleb's chest shook with silent laughter. I know. What if something goes wrong? Then Roy takes over. The settlement survives. He paused. You'll be okay. Don't. Eliza, don't talk like you're not coming back. Her voice cracked. Don't you dare. He pulled back, looked at her. Then promise me something. What? Promise me that if I don't come back, Caleb, promise me you'll stay anyway, that you won't run, that you'll keep fighting for this place. Eliza's eyes burned. Why would I stay if you're not here? Because you belong here, not because of me. Because this is your home now. It's only home because you're in it. Caleb's expression softened. That's not true. Yes, it is. No. He cupped her face. You made this place yours long before I told you I loved you. You fought for it, bled for it, stood up to Caroline and Warren and everyone else who tried to push you around. You did that, not me. I did it because of you. Maybe at first, but not anymore. He leaned his forehead against hers. So promise me, please. Eliza closed her eyes. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she wouldn't promise something she couldn't guarantee. But the desperation in his voice broke her. I promise, she whispered. Thank you. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of everything they couldn't say. And when he pulled away, he said, I'm coming back. You better. I will. Because I'm too stubborn to let a mountain kill me. And because, he smiled, because I have something worth coming back to. Eliza's throat tightened. She kissed him again, and they held each other until dawn. The morning Caleb left, the entire settlement turned out again. But this time the mood was different, heavier, more afraid, because everyone knew what the northern route meant. Warren gave another speech, shorter this time. Bring them back, he said to Caleb. Whatever it takes. Bring them back. Caleb nodded. Then he mounted his horse. The other 4 men did the same. Eliza stood at the front of the crowd, her arms wrapped around herself. Caleb looked down at her. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything they needed to say passed between them. I love you. Come back to me. I will. Then he turned his horse and rode away. Eliza watched until they disappeared into the mountains, watched until she couldn't see them anymore, watched until Sarah gently pulled her away. Come on, Sarah said. We've got work to do. And they did, because life didn't stop just because the people you loved rode into danger. The first week after Caleb left was the longest of Eliza's life. Every day felt like a month. Every hour stretched impossibly long. She threw herself into work, helped with everything she could, tried to stay busy enough that she didn't have time to think. But at night, alone in the cabin, the thoughts came anyway. What if he didn't make it? What if the route was worse than he remembered? What if she cut the thought off? Forced herself to breathe. Caleb was smart, capable. He'd survived worse. He'd come back. He had to. The second week, tensions in the settlement started to rise. Food was running low, tempers were short, and people were scared. Eliza heard the whispers. Some blamed Caleb for leaving. Some blamed her for being the reason he'd refused the valley in the first place. Margaret shut those down when she heard them. The valley was bleeding us dry long before she showed up, Margaret said loudly one afternoon. Anyone who says otherwise is rewriting history. It helped, but it didn't stop the undercurrent of fear. By the third week, things got worse. One of the children got sick, high fever, chills, the kind of sick that needed medicine they didn't have. The mother begged Warren to send someone to the valley. Just this once, she pleaded. Just enough to save my son. Warren's face was gray. They won't help us. Not now. You don't know that? I do. They made it clear. No trade, no exceptions. Then what am I supposed to do? Watch him die? The room was silent. Eliza stood in the back, her heart breaking. Then she stepped forward. I'll go. Everyone turned to look at her. What? Warren said. I'll go to the valley. I'll ask for medicine. They won't give it to you. Maybe not, but I have to try. It's a waste of time. It's a child's life. Eliza's voice was firm. And if there's even a chance they'll help, I have to take it. Warren shook his head. You have no idea what you're walking into. Then tell me. He did. The valley was 3 days' ride south, through terrain that was already starting to freeze, and even if she made it there, the chances of them helping were slim to none. Caroline hates you, Warren said bluntly. She'll probably laugh in your face. Then I'll deal with it. Eliza, I'm going. She looked at the mother, at the desperation in her eyes. I'll leave at dawn. The mother started crying. Thank you, thank you. Eliza just nodded, because she had no idea if she could actually pull this off, but she had to try. That night, Sarah helped her pack. You're insane, Sarah said. Probably. Caroline's going to eat you alive. Maybe. And you're going anyway. Yeah. Sarah shook her head. You really love him, don't you? Eliza paused. What does Caleb have to do with this? Everything. You're doing this because it's what he would do. You're becoming him. That's not... Eliza stopped. Is it? Sarah smiled. Yeah, it is, and it's kind of beautiful. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she just kept packing. The ride to the valley took 4 days instead of 3. The weather turned. Snow fell. The temperature dropped. Eliza's horse struggled through drifts. She had to stop twice to rest, to warm herself by fires that barely kept the cold at bay. But she kept going, because a child's life depended on it. She reached the valley on the 4th evening. It was everything the settlement wasn't. Big, prosperous, warm. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys. Lights glowed in windows. People moved through streets that were clean and organized. Eliza felt out of place immediately. She dismounted, tied her horse, walked toward the main house. A servant stopped her at the door. Can I help you? I need to see Caroline Markham. Miss Markham isn't receiving visitors. Tell her Eliza Ridge is here. The servant's eyebrows rose. Wait here. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Caroline stood there, dressed in a silk gown that probably cost more than Eliza had earned in her entire life. She smiled. Well, this is a surprise. I need your help. Do you now? A child in the settlement is sick. He needs medicine. Please. Caroline's smile widened. Come inside. Let's talk. Eliza followed her into a sitting room that was absurdly luxurious. Velvet furniture, crystal lamps, a fire roaring in a marble fireplace. Caroline poured herself a drink, didn't offer one to Eliza. So, Caroline said, you came all this way to beg. I came to ask for help. Same thing. Caroline sat, crossed her legs. Tell me, where's your husband? Working. Still, how industrious. Caroline sipped her drink. Or is he avoiding you? I've heard the northern route is brutal this time of year. Eliza's stomach dropped. How did you... Please, we have eyes everywhere. We knew about his little expedition the day he left. Caroline's smile turned cold. Tell me, do you think he'll make it back? Yes. You sound very certain. I am. Interesting. Because I'd give him about a 30% chance. Maybe less. Caroline set down her drink. But you didn't come here to discuss odds. You came for medicine. Yes. And what are you offering in return? Eliza swallowed. What do you want? Caroline studied her, long and slow. Then she said, Caleb. Eliza's blood ran cold. What? You heard me. I'll give you the medicine. I'll even reopen one supply route, enough to keep your settlement alive through winter. Caroline leaned forward. In exchange, you leave, quietly, permanently, and you convince Caleb that the marriage was a mistake. That's insane. Is it? You get the medicine, the child lives, the settlement survives. Everyone wins. Except me. You'll have money, freedom, a chance to start over somewhere that actually wants you. Caroline's voice softened. False sympathy. Isn't that what you came here for in the first place? An escape? Eliza's hands clenched. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to tell Caroline to go to hell. But then she thought about the child, about his mother's desperate face, about the settlement slowly starving. How do I know you'll keep your word? Eliza asked quietly. Caroline smiled. You don't. But what choice do you have? Eliza closed her eyes, thought about Caleb, about the life they'd built, about the promise she'd made. Then she opened her eyes and said, No. Caroline's smile faltered. What? I said no. Eliza stood. You want me to betray the man I love to save people who've finally accepted me. You want me to throw away everything I've fought for because you're too proud to admit you lost. I haven't lost. Yes, you have. Because Caleb chose me. Not because I was useful. Not because I brought land or money or connections, but because he wanted to, and you can't stand that. Caroline's face hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's mine to make. Eliza turned toward the door. That child will die, Caroline called after her, and it'll be your fault. Eliza stopped, turned back. No, she said, it'll be yours, because you had the power to help and chose not to. You used a sick child as a bargaining chip, and that says everything about who you are. She walked out, left Caroline sitting there, and didn't look back. The ride back was brutal. Eliza pushed her horse hard, harder than she should have, because she needed to get back, needed to find another solution, needed to prove that refusing Caroline had been the right choice. But doubt crept in. What if the child died? What if she'd just condemned him by saying no? What if... She shook her head. No. There had to be another way. She reached the settlement 5 days after she'd left, exhausted, half-frozen, empty-handed. Sarah met her at the edge of town. Did you? No. Sarah's face fell. But I have an idea, Eliza said quickly. Is the child still alive? Barely. His fever broke yesterday. He's weak but stable. Relief flooded through her. Thank God. What happened with Caroline? I'll tell you later. Right now I need to talk to Warren. She found him in the main lodge, told him everything, Caroline's offer, her refusal, the realization that had hit her on the ride back. We can't rely on the valley, Eliza said. Not now, not ever. So we need to build something better. A network of settlements that support each other, share resources, trade fairly. Warren stared at her. That would take months, maybe years. Then we start now. Eliza pulled out a map she'd been working on. These settlements already said they'd help. We expand from there, build relationships, create alternatives. And in the meantime, we ration, we hunt, we survive. She looked at him, just like we always have. Warren was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. All right, let's try it. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Eliza sent more letters, made more deals, coordinated hunting parties and rationing schedules. The settlement stabilized. Not comfortably, but enough. And then on the 13th day, a rider appeared on the horizon, then another, then 3 more. They were back. Caleb was back. Eliza ran. She didn't care who saw, didn't care how it looked. She just ran. Caleb dismounted, exhausted, his face gaunt, a bandage wrapped around his left hand, but alive. Alive. Eliza slammed into him, nearly knocked him over. He caught her, held her tight. I told you I'd come back, he said hoarsely. You're an idiot. I know. Don't ever do that again. I won't, I promise. She pulled back, looked at him, really looked at him. He'd lost weight, had new scars, looked like he'd been through hell, but his eyes were the same. Did you get it? She asked. Yeah, not as much as I hoped, but enough. Relief crashed over her. And you? Caleb asked. What happened while I was gone? A lot. Tell me. So she did. The fire, the negotiations, Caroline's visit, her trip to the valley, everything. Caleb listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You went to the valley alone." "Yes." "To ask Caroline for help." "Yes." "And she tried to make you leave me." "Yes." "And you said no." "Of course I said no." Caleb stared at her. "Why? Why?" "Because I love you. Because this is my home. Because—" She stopped. "Because I'm not going anywhere." His expression cracked, and then he was kissing her, hard and desperate and full of 6 weeks of fear and loneliness and love. When he pulled back, he said, "Marry me." Eliza laughed. "We're already married." "For real this time. No contract. No deal. Just us." He took her hands. "I want to stand in front of everyone and choose you, not because I have to, but because I want to, because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I don't want there to be any doubt." Eliza's eyes stung. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Then yes, yes." Caleb kissed her again, and this time the entire settlement cheered. The problem was, the valley hadn't given up. 2 days after Caleb returned, Warren received a letter. Caroline's father. Formal. Cold. A final offer. The valley would restore all supply routes, provide food and medicine through winter, even offer favorable trade terms. In exchange, Caleb stepped down as foreman. "They're still trying to control us," Roy said. Warren nodded. "And if we refuse?" "Then they cut us off completely. Make sure no one else trades with us either." Silence. Caleb sat at the table, his expression dark. "How much influence do they have?" "Enough. The settlements we've been working with, they'll be pressured, threatened. Some will fold. And the ones that don't? The valley will make their lives hell." More silence. Finally, Thomas spoke up. "What if we didn't need them?" Everyone turned to look at him. "I'm serious. What if we built something they couldn't touch? A coalition of settlements that operate independently, that don't bow to the valley's threats." "That would take years," Warren said. "Maybe, but we've already started. We have relationships, trust. What if we formalize it? Make it official?" Caleb leaned forward. "You're talking about an alliance." "I'm talking about survival, about making sure no single family or settlement ever has this kind of power again." Warren shook his head. "It's too ambitious, too risky." "And giving in to the valley isn't?" Thomas looked around the table. "We have a choice. We can keep letting them dictate our lives, or we can build something better." The room erupted into debate. Arguments flew. But Eliza saw something underneath the chaos. Hope. Real hope. That night, she and Caleb sat by the fire. "They're actually considering it," Caleb said. "A real alliance." "Good. It might not work, but it might." Eliza leaned against him. "And that's worth fighting for." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, "When I was out there, on the road, I kept thinking about you, about this place, about what we were building." He paused. "And I realized something. This isn't about the valley anymore. It's about us. About proving we can survive on our own terms." "And can we?" "I don't know. But I want to try." Eliza smiled. "Then we'll try together." He kissed the top of her head. And they sat there, watching the fire, planning their future. The next month was chaos. Caleb and Thomas traveled to neighboring settlements, pitched the idea of an alliance. Some were interested, some were skeptical, some flat out refused. But slowly, impossibly slowly, it started to come together. 5 settlements agreed to join, then 7, then 10. They drafted agreements, set up trade routes, established emergency protocols. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, setbacks, moments where it seemed like the whole thing would collapse. But they kept pushing, and gradually, something real started to form. A network, a community, an alternative to the valley's control. Caroline tried to interfere. She sent letters, made threats, pressured allies, but the settlements held firm, because they'd seen what independence looked like, and they wanted it. 3 months after Caleb returned, the alliance was officially established. 12 settlements, operating independently, supporting each other. The valley lost its stranglehold. Not overnight, but enough. And for the first time in 20 years, Caleb's settlement didn't owe anyone anything. They were free. The wedding happened in spring, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The entire settlement showed up. So did representatives from the allied settlements. It was small, simple, perfect. Eliza wore a dress Sarah and Margaret had helped her make. White lace, simple cut, beautiful. Caleb wore his best shirt and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. They stood in front of everyone, hand in hand, and said the words that made it real. Roy, acting as officiant, smiled. By the power vested in me by absolutely no one, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Everyone laughed. Caleb kissed her, and the settlement erupted in cheers. At the reception, Warren pulled Eliza aside. I owe you an apology, he said. Eliza blinked. For what? For doubting you. For thinking you were just some temporary inconvenience. He paused. You saved this place. You know that, right? I didn't. Yes, you did. You stood up when no one else would. You fought for people who didn't even like you. You refused to give up. Warren's voice was gruff. This settlement is better because you're in it. Eliza's throat tightened. Thank you. Warren nodded, then walked away, leaving Eliza standing there, trying not to cry. Sarah appeared with a cup of something alcoholic. You okay? Yeah, just... Eliza laughed. I can't believe this is real. Better get used to it. You're stuck here now. Good. They clinked cups, and Eliza looked around at the celebration, at the people who'd become her family, at the place that had become her home, at Caleb laughing with Roy across the room, and she thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Lost. Invisible. Desperate. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd learned that survival wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, about fighting, about refusing to disappear. Years later, when people asked Eliza how she'd ended up in the mountains, she'd smile and say it was a long story. But the truth was simpler. She'd been broken, and then she'd put herself back together. Not because someone saved her, but because she'd finally learned to save herself. And along the way, she'd found something she never expected. A home. A purpose. A love that didn't ask her to be anything other than exactly who she was. The settlement thrived under the alliance. Trade flourished. New families arrived. Children were born. And through it all, Eliza and Caleb stood side by side. Building, growing, fighting for the life they'd chosen. It wasn't always easy. There were hard winters, difficult decisions, moments of doubt, but they faced everything together, just like they'd promised. 5 years after that first winter, Eliza stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. Caleb came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. How far we've come. We have come pretty far. You ever regret it, choosing me over the easy path? Caleb turned her to face him. Never. Not once. Not even close. Even when things got hard? Especially then. He smiled. You made me better. Made this place better. Made everything better. Eliza leaned into him. I love you. I love you too. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the sky turned pink and gold. And Eliza thought about everything that had led her here. The pain, the struggle, the fear, but also the hope, the love, the belonging. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it, every single moment, because in the end, she'd learned the most important lesson of all. That home wasn't a place. It was a choice to stay, to fight, to build something real even when the world tried to tear it down. And Eliza had made that choice, every day, over and over again. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because this mountain, this man, this life, it was hers, and she'd fought too hard to let it go. 10 years later, the settlement had doubled in size. The alliance had grown to 23 settlements. And Eliza and Caleb had 2 children, a daughter named Sarah, after Eliza's first real friend in the mountains, and a son named Roy, after the man who'd believed in them from the start. They were loud, messy, perfect. And watching them run through the settlement, laughing and playing, Eliza sometimes had to stop and just breathe, because this was everything she'd never dared to hope for: a family, a community, a future. One evening, Sarah, now a young woman herself, found Eliza in the garden. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetheart? How did you end up here, really?" Eliza set down her tools. "That's a long story. I've got time." So Eliza told her. Not all of it. Not the parts that were too painful, but enough. About being lost. About finding Caleb. About choosing to stay even when everything said to run. When she finished, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then, "Were you scared?" "Terrified." "But you stayed anyway." "Yeah." "Why?" Eliza thought about it. "Because I finally found something worth being scared for." Sarah smiled. "I hope I find that someday." "You will." Eliza pulled her close. "And when you do, don't let anyone tell you you're not strong enough to keep it." Sarah hugged her back, and Eliza closed her eyes. Grateful. So grateful. For all of it. The night Caleb turned 50, the settlement threw a party. Everyone came. The entire alliance sent representatives. It was loud, chaotic, full of life. And at the center of it all, Caleb stood with Eliza by his side. Gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes. But still him, still strong, still stubborn, still hers. "You tired yet?" Eliza asked. "Of what?" "This. All of it." Caleb looked around, at the people, the laughter, the community they'd built. "Never." "Good answer." He pulled her close. "You know what the best part of all this is?" "What?" "I get to do it with you." Eliza's eyes stung. Even after all these years, he could still do that to her. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." They danced, and as they moved across the floor, surrounded by friends and family, Eliza thought about that mysterious letter, the one that had brought her here all those years ago. She'd never found out who sent it, never learned if it had been a test or a mistake or just random chance. But it didn't matter, because whatever the reason, it had led her exactly where she needed to be. To this place, to this man, to this life. And she wouldn't change a single thing. When Eliza was 70, she wrote her story down, not for publication, just for her children, her grandchildren, anyone who came after. She wanted them to know that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and choosing courage anyway. That home wasn't something you were given. It was something you built. That love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth fighting for. And that sometimes the best thing you could do was stay, even when everything said to run, especially then. She finished the last page on a cold winter evening. Caleb sat beside her, reading over her shoulder. When he finished, he said, "You made me sound better than I am. I made you sound exactly like you are. I was a stubborn ass. You still are." He laughed. "Fair." Eliza set down the pen. "Do you think it's enough? The story? Enough for what?" "To help them understand. Why we fought so hard. Why this place matters." Caleb took her hand. "They'll understand. Because they're living it. And when we're gone, then they'll keep building, just like we did." He smiled. "That's what legacy is. Not what we leave behind, but what we teach them to create for themselves." Eliza squeezed his hand and knew he was right. When Eliza Rowan Ridge died at 83, the entire alliance came to mourn. She'd lived a full life, a hard life, a beautiful life. And she'd faced the end the same way she'd faced everything else. With courage, with grace, with the knowledge that she'd done everything she could. Caleb followed her 6 months later. Not from sickness, just from being ready. They were buried side by side, overlooking the mountains that had been their home. And at the funeral, her granddaughter read from the story Eliza had written, the part about choosing to stay, about refusing to be invisible, about building something real in a world that tried to break you. When she finished, she looked out at the crowd and said, "My grandmother taught me that survival isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. It's about fighting. It's about refusing to disappear." She paused. "And she taught me that home isn't a place. It's a choice to stay, to build, to love, even when it's hard." Another pause. So that's what we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep building, keep fighting, keep choosing this place, this community, this life. She smiled through her tears, because that's what they would have wanted, and because her voice broke. Because it's what they taught us to do. The crowd stood, and as one, they said, "We stay." 2 words, simple, powerful, a promise, a legacy, a choice. And in the mountains, where the wind still howled and the winters still killed the unprepared, the settlement stood strong, not because it was easy, but because the people who built it had learned the most important lesson of all. That survival wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about finding something worth enduring it for, and then refusing to let go. No matter what. The end. Epilogue. 50 years after Eliza's death, the settlement had become a town. The alliance had grown into a federation. And the valley had finally learned to respect them. Because the people of the mountains had proven something the valley never understood, that real strength doesn't come from control. It comes from community, from choosing each other, supporting each other, building something together that no one could destroy. And at the center of the town, there stood a monument, a simple stone marker. It read, "In memory of Eliza Rowan Ridge and Caleb Ridge, who taught us that home is not a place, but a choice, and that the bravest thing you can do is stay." Every year, on the anniversary of their wedding, the entire federation gathered. They told stories, shared memories, passed down the lessons they'd learned, and they renewed their commitment to stay, to fight, to build, to choose courage over comfort, community over isolation, love over fear. Because that's what Eliza and Caleb had taught them, not through perfection, but through persistence, through showing up every day and choosing to make something better, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And in a world that tried to make people small, they'd shown everyone what it meant to stand tall, not because they were never afraid, but because they chose courage anyway, not because they never wanted to run, but because they chose to stay. And that made all the difference.